My name is DeWayne Lucas of Ebonics Films. We're at Rockstar Studios, and you're watching Urban Matrix. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and I moved to Wisconsin when I was a kid because of the violence in the neighborhood. My mom had 6 kids, and she moved all of us to Wisconsin in hopes of a better lifestyle there. It was actually worse. So growing up, you know, in an impoverished environment with, losing so many friends to gang violence and drug violence and, abuse, all different types of abuse. I was very, focused on, trying to get my education and trying to find, a way out of that environment, a legal way out. I tried different paths and things like that. So I got into the entertainment industry because I loved to do poetry. That was kind of my escape. I liked to write about my problems and issues and things like that. So that kind of led to me getting into the art world and taking it more seriously once I finished with school. I moved back to Chicago to help my cousin. He has a fine art gallery here. I helped him to sell fine art, so I started traveling all over the world selling sculptures and oil paintings and things like that. So it was a pretty big contrast from what I was used to, kind of opened up a new world for me. But it was also enough exposure for me to kind of direct my energy towards my own personal passion. Because even though there was an opportunity for me, it wasn't really what I saw myself doing. So I was able to take my love for poetry, my love for music. I started doing, talent shows and rapping for money at different colleges on different stages and different events, to starting to figure out what I wanted to do to help those who was around me. Finally, try to spread a positive message about my exposure and how writing was literally my escape. Ebonics Films started when I started a company called SLH for 3 different people I used to work with. It was Saunders, Lucas, and Hearn, all of our last names. And we worked with the alderman on the south side of Chicago on 47th King Drive. I worked at the Spoken Word Cafe, was my first venue. I used to do open mics. I used to go to the Cotton Club and all those different things. But the Spoken Word Cafe was the first venue I rented out to start my own business. And, we had variety shows. We would bring in a variety of different talents: singers, actors, dancers, poets, live bands, comedians, you name it. And it was a small place, but we started out with a very small audience, 5, 6 people show up, and then, it started to grow. And we took it from there, and it became really popular. We hung up banners and signs and things like that, and, I kind of grew a liking for the advertisement aspect. When that started to decline, we were the only open mic variety show, talent show on the south side of Chicago that didn't have any violence. And people always asked, well, how did we do that? Well, it was because of the care that we gave to each individual person. And we would pay people, we gave them respect. If somebody was upset because they didn't get a chance to showcase their talent, we would offer them different incentives and, let them get in free the next time, whatever have you. So I developed everything, my own brand, my own tickets, my own flyers. I would promote and advertise driving all over Chicago. So the band kind of fell apart. The people that I was working with, everybody had different ambitions. And so I decided to go back to school and study entrepreneurship at Forbes School of Business. And while I was in school, I started writing about my experience with SLH. A lot of things started to come back to me about what I did what I did wrong, what I need to do better next time around, and the things that I was studying in school in theory started to make sense about the approach as far as protecting my business, copyrights, and all these other different things that you need as far as contracts, as far as litigation, dealing with different entities. But the main thing that I focused on and reflected on was all the things that I did correctly all that, which was learning from all the mistakes that I made. Even though I made a lot of mistakes, I picked up on a lot of things. I learned how to edit videos, so then I became a video editor. I learned how to, program these shows and choreograph different performances. While I was reflecting on these things, and I realized how I was gradually transforming my life. Even though I was making mistakes, I was growing at the same time. And then I started to drill down to all those principles and things that made me learn and made me grow and kept me out of trouble. And I decided, why not write a book about my experiences and how I was successful, even though I felt like I was a failure. And so people would often ask me, how did I survive and what did I do? And what was my passion? So that's where the idea for writing a book came from while I was in school. So as I was studying and on my downtime, I would take time and focus on writing, trying to keep everything in order and go back and forth to finish. So before I even got, anything else done, I wrote an autobiography about SLH and, how Ebonics was starting to unfold. The book was an autobiography with 8 chapters, and after each chapter, there was a live song, because most of it was music that I was writing. So it was a live song after every chapter, and then I realized as I went through the chapters that there were people calling me to ask me, when are you gonna, come out with another show? There were people's parents that would reach out to me and said, man, you kept a lot of peace and positivity in the neighborhood, and I don't know what my son would have done if he hadn't gotten into this. And then there were people that were branching out that I didn't even realize that were starting their own shows and their own businesses, and it kind of just kind of spread, and I didn't realize how much influence those things had on other people. And that's where the idea for the comic book came from, The Chronicles of Ebonics Man. And so I wanted to focus on the autobiography at first and the stage play musical and grow that. But I realized that if that was a really big project where I had to do a casting call, get a lot of more people involved, it would be a lot easier for me to build awareness and grow that if I focused on the comic book series first. Ebonics Man is a personification of who I was as a young rapper that a lot of other rap artists looked up to as far as positive hip-hop music in the community, and literally breaking up fights and stuff like that and telling people, hey, let's, you can express your talent in a different way. Always didn't use those words, but it became something that was really important. It wasn't just, popular, in our community. It was important. People needed that in order to not kill each other. So Ebonics Man became this personified hero, so to speak. And the only way I was able to bring the peace was to write about every single situation, write about everything. So he was sort of a hip hop activist. So the character for Ebonics Man is literally a cartoon version of me. So he has this giant microphone with fire coming out of it. So he's not just a regular superhero, he's actually a giant, because I'm 6'5". So I was always the biggest person breaking up the fights, the biggest person rapping, like you couldn't miss me. So that's how come he's an immortal giant. And the reason why he's immortal is because music is immortal. Music is powerful. You can't kill that. So in the comic book, it is a reflection of what's actually going on in the streets in the urban community. All of a sudden, this guy who has this film company in the comic book, he's a real person. He goes through real problems. He has a relationship. There's police chases. There's violence. But he's living these different lives. He has these different personalities. He's a businessman. He's a husband. His wife has no idea, that he likes to do rap at night. The rappers, they have no idea that he runs a business during the daytime, and none of them have any idea that he's this superhero who turns into this giant. So on stage, everything is going fine. All of a sudden, police cars are blaring, something happens, somebody get kidnapped, whatever. Here comes Ebonics Man. With every hero comes villains. So, there's bad guys, there's good guys, but there's also allies. There's weapons. And in this particular story, he's a rapper that uses everyday normal things for weapons. The microphone may be one of his main weapons. And a lot of people, when they look at the image of Ebonics Man, they say, oh, I get it. You know, it's the giant microphone on fire, and he's going and he's smashing buildings, and he's, you know, and that's what a lot of people look at. But the logo with the feather pen and the map of Africa is actually from the definition of Ebonics. Ebonics came from ebony and phonics. Ebony meaning of African descent or black descent, phonics meaning language or literature. Coincidentally, that is his most primary weapon, and his most powerful weapon is the ink pen. It's not the microphone, because everything that he writes with that, it turns into his reality. And what he's doing is he's showing people the power of that pen, not only through the logo that he represents and his brand that he represents, but how he was able to create different realities, different dimensions, and how each of us can do that with the power of our mind, with the power of our writing. And this is a young man who literally wrote himself out of danger. So when he's doing these performances on stage, they all started from something that he wrote down. So he's finding a way to do that inside of the comic book, and Ebonics Films as a whole inspires creative solutions. And so the acronym for Ebonics is Everyday Business Operating Network Inspiring Creative Solutions. So the actual word Ebonics helps to solidify the mission of Ebonics Man. So Ebonics Films, the company, you know, it has the comic book, it has the autobiography, it has a stage play musical, and it has a live soundtrack that complements all of them. So each comic book comes out, you know, with different allies, different villains, different heroes, but there's also music to accommodate those. So for example, his secret weapon is his ink pen and his microphone and a moderate amount of other, you know, normal things that, if you think about the things that a rapper would use, a book bag, his shades, all those different things turn into a weapon inside of the comic book. And then every time he recruits or meets somebody else or saves somebody's expressing their talent, everybody has a different unique talent. And that unique talent becomes exaggerated inside of the book as their superpower as well. So everybody has value in the urban community. Everybody has a superpower. Everybody has a hero. And that is the very definition of Ebonics Films. A lot of people ask me, they say, well, why Ebonics? Why black slang? Why? And I tell them, I said, well, do you know what Ebonics means and where it came from? And do you understand the cultural value? Once you start to understand the cultural value, because whether you like it or not, that's ours. Mm-hmm. That's our language. And we may not value it, but guess what? Wall Street does. Right. And when you look at the numbers and you look at hip hop, because that's Ebonics, it's exactly what it is, you would be blown away by the numbers. We don't understand that. We let people tell us, oh, that's slang, you'll never get anywhere with that. You don't you're talking like this and you're talking like that, and why don't you get an education and speak proper English? But you don't go to a Spanish community or you don't go to a Chinese community and tell them you need to learn proper English. They speak Chinese, but they are proud of their culture, they're proud of their language. Even if they speak slang, they're proud of the way they speak. This is how they understand and communicate with each other. So whether we like it or not, at least in the urban community, and where all of the murder and the violence and all of the young men and women are dropping like flies, this is what they understand. So to take that a step further, they understand it based on what they hear every day on the radio, what they see every day on TV. It is the most popular form of music in the urban community. It is the most predominant dialect. So why would I go to the urban community and try to talk to somebody and help them and I'm speaking Spanish? They don't understand what I'm talking about. I'm speaking proper English. They think I can't relate to them. But if I'm speaking Ebonics, this is what they talk every day. If I'm talking to them from a perspective, from Jay-Z's perspective, from Lil Wayne's perspective, they can sit down and have a conversation with them, but they'd rather see them rocking out on the stage, speaking their language through music. Because whatever they say on that stage, that's what they're going to mimic in the urban community. If they tell them to drink a specific kind of liquor, they're going to drink that kind of liquor. They tell them to wear a certain kind of clothes, they're going to wear those kind of clothes. So why not use that same power of Ebonics and teach them, empower them, teach them about what they have to bring and to give to the world? The first thing I learned in business People will tell you all the time, don't use your own money, use other people's money, and that way, you just leverage your connections and all these different things. That's false. You invest in yourself, you use your own money, to grow, because you're planting seeds. And those seeds are quality when it's your money. It doesn't matter how small they are. Don't try to do big things, do small things. A tree doesn't grow overnight. It starts small. This is tiny. But the best way to do that, and I teach this in my comic books, in my autobiography, in the stage play, I teach the same thing. I teach it in my logo, is with an ink pen. That's all you need. You don't need anybody's money. You don't need anybody's connections, fame. You don't need social media. All you need is an ink pen and a piece of paper. And I show you how in the books, in the comic books, in the States, everything that this company does is showing you how to use one tool, and that's an ink pen.